Hi, welcome to Soul Sense from Samaritan's Well, and we have a special guest today, Dr. Albert Bramante. Welcome, Albert.
Thank you so much, Mark, for the invite. I'm really happy to be here.
Hey, we're excited to have you. Albert is a college professor with over 20 years of experience. He's been a talent agent. He's currently a performance mindset coach, and he's coming to us from New Jersey, just a few miles from New York. Could you talk to us a little bit about the significance of resiliency?
Yeah, well, resiliency is really about the ability to transform our experiences, even if they're negative, into positive. So it's like turning, it's like almost like the ancient practice of alchemy, which is like turning lead into gold. So
Oh, right.
turning our negative experiences or our traumas, our hardships into kind of a catalyst for growth. So allowing these things to help us grow from the moment onwards rather than define us in a sense. So let's say you get someone who may have had a rough upbringing. Now,
Hmm.
they can go in two different directions. They can go down the path of self destruction, substance abuse, repeating the cycles, or they can turn this around and make it so that they're making a difference out into the world.
Hmm.
So what essentially is happening here is they're becoming a leader. They're becoming a making a difference in form of other people instead of playing the victim, instead of feeling sorry for themselves, instead of going down the path of self destruction. They're choosing, again, going back using the alchemy example, turning their pain and struggles into gold,
I,
even if
I
it's
love
crystal
that.
gold.
I love that. And we know that it's possible because we've seen people do it, right? I mean, one of my favorite simple examples is the lady that started the organization Mothers Against Drunk Drivers. She had a tragedy happen and she turned that into motivation to help save, and she has helped save tens of thousands of people through that organization. And of
Hmm.
course, somebody else could have went through that and become an alcoholic or just been
Yeah.
depressed the rest of their lives. So that resiliency is at the key of this positive change. But tell us more about some of the things that you've seen and some of the things you teach. I'm sure as a professor.
Well, resilience is a really heavily core theme in my classes. Now, one of the classes that I teach on a regular basis is child psychology or child
Okay.
development, and my one of my major missions or tenets of the class is how how much the impact of our childhood affects who we are today as an adult.
Right.
So most, if not all of our behavior has some most if not all of our behavior has some influence in our development and why we do kind of certain quirks and patterns of our behaviors today and the way we
Hmm.
react to people, the way we respond. And so it's important to have an understanding of all of that and how that affects us, and realizing how much resilience plays a role. Most of the students that I serve, and I teach at a community college. I've always taught at a community college.
Sure.
So the majority of my student population are non-traditional. They're not, some of them, yeah, maybe 18 to 22, but
Right.
they come from a lot of times immigrant families,
Hmm.
or were their first generation college students. Some of them are older, some of them are here in the country for the first time. So
Right.
you're dealing with a non-traditional population. Now what comes with that is a lot of baggage, sometimes a lot of trauma, both
Right.
resolved and unresolved.
Hmm.
So one of the things over the years is I really kind of like incorporate resilience in all my classes. And from day one, I that's one of the first things when I talk about introduce the class is I'll go into a 5 or 10 minute talk about resiliency and the importance of that. of how that is so important and how that really kind of plays along the themes of everything we'll be discussing in the course. How much resilience plays a role in our development, and that again, it's not about like being superhuman or not being affected. Resiliency, you can still be affected and even still working through a lot of the issues. It's you just choose instead of to be a victim, like to be a creator, to triumph from it rather than wallow in it or rather than let it suck you in. So
That's good.
so that's the way I look at resiliency. It's like you still admit what happened. What happened to you is unfortunate. And it's okay to be sad. It's okay to be mad at times. It's
Right.
okay to experience what you're feeling. But instead of letting it hold you down, let's let it move you forward.
I like that. I like that, Dr. Albert. And I'm thinking about something that can be a pseudo resilience versus a real resilience. And I wanted to bring it up and see what you think. I've had some clients before, like I had a client super depressed in his mid 40s. This was 15 or 20 years ago. And he came in, and as we were going through his history, I knew he had two siblings. And to put it very simply, I said, well, what's your relationship like with sibling number one? And he's like, oh, well, I hate that one. And I said, okay, well, what's your relationship like with sibling number two? Well, I hate that one about that much less. And I'm like, oh, we should work on this. But his
Mm-hmm.
response was, no, because I hardly ever even think of them. So his deception is because I have it locked away and I hardly ever think about this trauma, I'm okay. And that's my resilience. Versus someone that faces it head on and goes, okay, I got to do something about this hate or this terrible grief. So, what would you say about people that have a pseudo resilience where they just have it blocked off and they're denying it versus like facing it and processing it?
Well, I might even kind of challenge whether that's resilience at all if you're blocking it
Okay.
because
Okay. Good.
because it's easy to do it. Sometimes the easiest thing is to not face it, and
Yep.
but the important thing is it's like I use the analogy of the pot with boiling water.
Uh huh.
If you have a pot of like a kettle of boiling water that's really hot and scalding, and you try to put a lid on it and ignore it,
Yep.
eventually the pressure is going to explode and you're going to have a
Yes.
mess on your hands. And the same thing
Yes.
goes with our emotions. Now, we might be able to bury it from time to time. We might be
Right.
able
Right.
to do that, but you're going to start to see people having physical issues.
Mm-hmm.
Especially what we're starting to see now with like issues like with digestive, gastrointestinal, IBS, for instance,
Sure.
irritable bowel syndrome, other types of ailments, chronic pain, back pain. Even though there might be some organic causes for a lot of this stuff, but a lot of it has to do with unprocessed anger,
Yes.
unprocessed pain, unprocessed trauma. So you might be able to get away with it for a bit by saying, "Okay, I'm
Uh
not going
huh.
to face it.
Uh huh. Uh
I'm going
huh.
to put it behind them," or like especially in the masculine world, the man up and just ignore it. The
Right.
problem is you can't ignore that. It's going to catch
Right.
up to you, and that's why
Right.
sometimes we even see some of the people in the news who just snap. And it's
Yes.
like, people will say, and you hear people say in the community, well, what happened? I'm like,
Yeah.
well, no, I mean, what happened was you saw someone who tried to bury so much pain after a while that the pain just said, hello, I'm not going to be buried anymore. Here we go.
Yeah. One of my sayings, Dr. Albert, that I say with my clients is, um, it's okay to bury things, just don't bury them alive. And that's where people
Yeah.
miss it, right? It's like, no, it hasn't been put to rest properly. You're going to have to grieve. You're going to have to feel it. You're going to have to face it. You're going to have to get to forgiveness. You have to face it head on sooner or later.
Oh, 100%. And this, a lot of times the way we're parented sometimes is, where our parents sometimes are emotionally dismissive, where it's like,
Right.
okay, you can't get mad, you can't get upset, don't
Right.
Don't roll your eyes at me, or don't cry. I'll give you something to cry about. And
Mhm.
what you're doing there is you're dismissing the emotions of that child. Now, of course, there's different ways to do that, but I think a lot of times, and sometimes a lot of parents do this with great intentions. They want to protect their
Sure.
child, of course, of all things. But the
Mhm.
reality of it, there's a lot of emotions that are inevitable that we're going to experience.
That's
And
right.
rather than being emotionally dismissive, what we should be advocating is for parents to be kind of emotionally coaching, which means, okay, you're mad.
Right. What are we gonna
Okay,
do with that?
you're that. What are we going to do with that? Let's talk
Yeah.
through it.
You don't get to hit
Um,
your brother, but what can we do instead?
yeah, if you,
Right.
even if you need to simmer in your room, go ahead and do that. It's about teaching the proper release of emotions, because as an adult, we all know that we can't control the actions of other people. So there are
Right.
people that may do things that might, may be inconvenient to us, but ultimately as adults, we have the choice for emotions. We have the
Yes.
choice in how to respond. And this is where a lot of people, even my students, have sometimes a difficult time to understand is obviously we cannot control people who are going to act towards us or what they're going to do, but we control how we respond. So when somebody says, we hear this a lot, oh, my parent or my spouse made me mad today. Oh,
They
they
made me
just
mad.
they ticked me off. I'm like, no, let's correct that.
Right. Yes.
You chose to be
Yes.
mad. You chose to get ticked off by that.
Right.
And they're like, well, you don't understand. They did. I said, yeah, they
Yeah.
did an action,
Right.
but how you felt and how you respond is subjective. It's in your control.
Right.
So,
Right. And so many people, Albert, they're either it's especially as Christians, it's like there's certain in the church that are like, oh, you shouldn't get mad at all, or sometimes even sad. Oh no, we're not going to grieve over this person that died because we'll see him in heaven or celebrate. But I tell people, you can't imitate God unless you get mad or sad. But like you said, I can feel something internally, but how I express it, oh, I only blew my top because of, I mean, I've had husbands come in and they say, yeah, my wife hit me the other day. Really? Tell me about it. Yeah, she said she just hit me because, I did so and so. Or I'm like, no, she hit you because she chose to, right? And by the way,
exactly.
that is assault, whether the husband does it or the wife does it. It's assault, so you can call the
Hmm.
police on that. But you're right. We've got to tell them it's not. I didn't lose my temper because of my spouse, right? I may have gotten angry internally, but then if
Hmm.
I lose my temper, we got to understand that's our choice. Of course,
Yes.
it's colored by a lot of things, and maybe the next topic that we could talk about some is defense mechanisms, because that was one of the things I really wanted to cover some
Yeah.
with you, because that's so significant in our relationships. Could you tell us about defense mechanisms and what they're all about?
So, yeah, exactly. Or our ego, if you want to go back to a
Right,
Freudian or psychodynamic
right, right.
perspective, the ego is our protector. It is there to
Yeah,
protect us. Our brain is really designed. It does a great job of protecting us. Sometimes maybe a little
mhm.
overly so, but
A little
it's there
over.
to protect us. It's there to protect us, and that's the goal.
Sure.
So a lot of times, if we experience anxiety, or like
Uh-huh.
some situations that create a lot of anxiety, our brains can go into overdrive and protect us and defend us from the anxiety, which is what we call defense mechanisms. Now,
Sure.
all of us, every one of us, engage in defense mechanisms kind of like on a regular basis. So they're not necessarily pathological or abnormal in any way.
Sure.
However, if
Yeah,
we
there's
do them
not
too
like they're all
much,
bad.
if they're extreme, then obviously that may be something we need to work on if we're doing it all the time.
Sure.
So and I'll give you a couple of the ones that are
Sure.
one common. Repression is one of them. So
Okay.
now repression is when you block out a memory completely. So sometimes, you know in early childhood trauma, we may
Right.
block out a memory.
Yep.
Never happened. It did, but it never, we don't have access to that memory.
Right.
And it's because if we have access to that memory would have been very traumatic. But it comes out in other ways. So let's say, for example, you were attacked by a dog as a child. Let me use this as an arbitrary example. Now, you may not remember the attack, but now all of a sudden you're maybe around your friend's dog, your neighbor's dog, and you get this overwhelming sense of fear and
Mhm.
doom and the strong urge to run away.
Mhm.
That might be, and I'm saying might in quotation,
Sure.
in quotation marks, might be a sign of something to investigate. That maybe you had an incident in early childhood that was
Like an
traumatic around dog.
overreaction. If you see an overreaction or consistently overreacting.
Yeah, especially if it's certain stimuli or trigger, I would
Mhm.
say that might
Mhm.
be repression. Might be a way to look into things. Now, a
Sure.
strong distant cousin of that is denial. That's another
Okay.
defense mechanism.
Yeah.
Now, with denial, you kind of have knowledge of the true fact, but you try to put it behind you. We see this a lot with addicts or even
Okay.
people that stay in abusive relationships, where it's not so bad. No, it's not bad at all.
Mhm.
Like going back to the example of using the wife hitting the husband. The
Yeah.
husband's denial would be the husband saying, well, I did make her mad, and it
Yeah.
only happens once, and
Yeah.
she's
Yeah.
really a nice person.
Yeah.
Just don't press her buttons. And it's like,
Yeah. Yeah.
no, the truth of the matter is your wife may need some anger
Yeah.
management and counseling,
Yes.
and it has
Yes.
nothing to do with you. Or,
Yes.
a lot of times we see this a lot with substance users, alcoholics, drug users, especially in the beginning or the throes of their addiction. They will often try to tell you, or themselves really, how much in control they are.
Yes.
I'm not an addict. I just have a couple of drinks, or I
Yes.
smoke a little marijuana or weed. Hey, just
Mhm.
calm me down. I'm fine.
Mhm.
I don't have a
Mhm.
problem.
Mhm.
Or another form of denial would be blaming the other person. Like, we see
Okay.
this a lot with alcoholics. Will they'll blame their spouse or their children or their job for making them drink? I'm like,
Sure.
no, nobody
Yeah.
makes you take a drink.
Right.
Unless they have a gun to your head and say drink,
Yeah.
but that
Yeah.
rarely happens.
Right.
Most likely never did. So, because the truth of the matter, what's defending you there, the biggest thing reason why addicts have such a difficult time is they have to admit they're powerless to a
Yeah.
substance, that they're weak, that they're powerless, and especially if you come from an old school, if you're a man, especially, I'm not weak. No,
No.
absolutely not. So it's protecting you again from admitting that you're weak and
Yeah.
powerless over
Yeah.
over something. So denial is like we kind of know it's there, we just don't want to face it.
Sure. Sure.
Or that we have a problem. So,
Mhm.
and another interesting one that's very common is projection.
Okay.
Now, with projection, I may take a feeling that I'm having and putting onto somebody else.
Uh-huh.
So, let's say if, in a relationship, we see this a lot. Honey, I know you're not happy with me. I know you're not. You're
Right.
not happy in this relationship. We need to talk. We need to figure it out. There's a good chance that I may not be the one happy, but it's
Yes.
easy for me to put it onto you. And that's
Yes.
why sometimes if you're with people that are extremely judgmental or critical
Mhm. Mhm.
are really self-critical themselves
Okay.
and judgmental. And that's why I get a lot of people who come to me for coaching or even for advice. How do I deal with my judgmental spouse or my judgmental friend? They're always saying negative things about me. I'm like,
Mhm.
well, for one thing, the comfort is it's not about you. You're doing
Yes.
nothing wrong here.
Yes.
They have to feel better about themselves by saying something wrong about you. And here's a good test, because if you ever notice the people that are very judgmental, critical, the moment that you turn the tables on them, they don't know how to handle it. They get really visibly upset.
That's true.
So what happens here is, again, with projection, we're taking, a feeling we're attributing onto somebody else. So that's what I would say. Like, or if someone's always accusing you of being dishonest in a relationship, I would take a close look. That they may
Yes.
be the ones that are dishonest.
Yes. Yes, that's good.
Um, yeah, and the other one that I want to mention, I think defense mechanism that's common, is something called displacement.
Displacement.
Yeah, and what that would mean is, let's say you're at work and your boss, again, gets under your skin. Now,
Sure.
you may not be able to express your anger at your boss because obviously you don't want to lose your job.
Right.
So, but of course, now your wife, you come home and you tell your wife or your husband, they come out to greet you, and all of a sudden you're like, hurling insults at them, or saying
Mm.
something negative, or pushing them away, or you kick the dog or the cat, which hopefully you don't. But I'm
Mhm.
just saying,
Mhm.
because the targets in those targets, your spouse or your children or your pets, are much safer than the actual target.
Yes.
Which would be, your boss. You can't yell at your boss. Obviously, if you want to keep your job, or you can't
Yes.
yell at the authority figure if you don't, you can get yourself into trouble. But you'll take it out on somebody who's a much safer target, and
That
that's
that
what.
is that's so important. You see that in divorces, don't you? The kids will take out their anger on the safest parent.
Yes, and this is why sometimes people become what I call human punching bags,
Okay.
where it's like, it's unfair, but that the good the only, like I said, glimmer of hope that you would tell somebody who's going through this is like the receiving end. It's not
Right.
about you. Don't take it. It's not personal.
Right.
It's just
Right.
they're venting their frustrations out on you because you're a
Mhm.
much safer target.
Mhm.
Especially if you're the type, especially if you're a kid that is more gentle, or if you're the other parent that's more laid back and gentle.
Sure. That's true. That's true. And so all of these defense mechanisms, honestly, it takes some light to come in for me if I'm operating in one or more of these. Somehow there's going to have to be some truth and light come in for me to get some revelation. Now, of course, if I'm in a reasonably healthy relationship, and let's just say I'm displacing something, let's say to my wife or to my friend, if it's reasonably healthy, they should be asking me some questions. They should be, wait, Mark, I don't think this is about me, or honey, I don't think this is about me. Because that's obviously one of the antidotes is bringing some truth and light in. But what would you
Mm-hmm.
say about, just as we understand some of these, either g- having some of these defense patterns, which of course we all do, or being on the receiving end, what are some things just, that you would speak into that,
Well,
Dr. Albert?
especially if you're on the receiving end, as hard as it is, and it's definitely
Yes.
difficult to not react.
Yeah.
To not be
In
reactive.
kind, right? Get
Yeah,
revenge.
yeah. Don't get revenge. Don't react. Don't get on the defensive side, because and that's hard to do. Because especially if someone's
Yes.
spewing something at you, just remain calm. And that's why sometimes one of the best ways to diffuse anger is when you're calm.
Yes.
I talk to a lot of people working customer service, and sometimes when they get a really angry customer, you know, they find themselves, if you're just calm, eventually the customer's going to calm down and simmer it down. You don't
Yes.
match the person. You don't get it, really
No.
back in their face, because then that's going to start an argument. But the
Yeah.
important thing is to, and I'm glad we're having a conversation about these events mechanisms are becoming more and more important, because it's really important to understand this is not about you. If you're on the receiving end of this, most of the time it has nothing to do with you.
That's
So
that's good.
that's what I would kind of say is really that. And if you're a person doing this, I would just really take a step back and say, look, do I really feel this way? Or am I being unfair?
That's good. There's a verse in Proverbs that's pretty famous, and it's a pretty popular. It talks about a gentle answer turns away or turns down the volume of wrath. And I
Hmm.
think that's what we're talking about here.
Yeah, no,
Um,
that's absolutely.
Proverbs 15:1, a gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger.
Hmm.
But you're right. That's good counsel. Tell us
Yeah.
a little bit. Let's talk about identity. Because one of the things that I think you and I are in complete agreement with, we're trying to get to a place for ourselves or people that we work with to get the true identity that God made them to be, to blossom and to come out. But tell us a little bit about how roles assigned in childhood can block that true identity.
So a lot of times if you grew up with, let's say, a very critical parent,
Hmm.
as a child, you may learn, unintentionally that your job is to please the parent. Your
Okay.
job is to live the way that the parents want you to live, or live the life that they, want you to. And that may be a complete odds of who you are. And so now what you're doing is you're living your identity in a line of what somebody else expects you to do.
Hmm.
And sometimes I see this with people that are forced, like children are forced into career, like the family business, for instance.
Hmm. Hmm.
Or grandpa was a lawyer, dad's a lawyer. Now you're going to be a lawyer. And what if the kid wants to be an
Right.
artist or
Right.
musician or teacher or anything else? And so sometimes they can be forced into that profession. Um, as an agent, I don't work with that many child talent, but sometimes when I used to meet a lot of youth talent, and I would
Hmm.
have the parents come in, and I could almost tell immediately if the child even wanted to be in the even be there.
Oh, wow.
And I personally will not work with a child who has any bit of doubt that they want to do this,
Right.
because you're living the way the parents do this, or
Right.
sometimes I'll get, like, even infants. Like I'll get pictures of infants of parent, and the parents will write in a cover letter, my infant wants to be in commercials. I'm like, no, they don't. They don't even know what a
Right.
commercial. They don't even know what
No,
a commercial
I just
is.
want to play with some
What?
toys.
Yeah, exactly. Don't don't pull my leg on that. But that's the truth. It's what does the child really want to be here? Does the child really want to do that? So if a parent has their own issues, a lot of time their own projections, their own trauma, they might almost act like, in a sense, like the narcissistic parent, where now your job as a child, son, daughter, is to please me and to
Yeah.
please everything I do. And now all of a sudden, because the parent, especially if you send messages, parents use even unintentionally. Son, you made me proud today, or son, you disappointed me today, or daughter,
Sure.
you embarrassed me today.
Sure.
And now what you're sending messages is like, okay, well, I got to tiptoe my behavior, my own life, and to please you. And now this is going to follow me throughout the rest of my life. And so now what happens with identity is I'm not, or, if I'm this type of person, I'm not living what I want to do. I'm living my life in accordance to what you want to do or what my parents want to do. And that's why sometimes we see people going through like midlife crises, in their 30s and 40s, because they're really not living the life they wanted to live.
Yes.
So, um, identity is really important. And I, one of the authors I like is Stephen Covey, who wrote one of the classics, The Seven Habits of Highly Effective People.
Oh, yeah.
And one of his quotes was that true, identity theft is bad. Obviously, but true identity theft is living your life as a lie,
Ooh.
living living your, molding your identity to fit somebody else. That's true
Yes.
identity theft. So if you're trying to live in your parents, coattails or spotlight, and or anybody else's, you're really thefting yourself of your identity. You're really.
That is so good, Albert. And years ago, I heard this analogy, and I'll talk to my clients sometimes, okay? And I might ask them a question like this. When you were growing up, were your parents more like architects building from the blueprints they had, or were they like farmers taking the seeds and the land they were given and built and growing the best crop they could grow? Because the
Mhm.
parents that are architects, they're doing it from their own blueprints, right? The
Mhm.
farmers are saying, hey, here's this seed. I better find out what kind of seed it is and how it needs to be grown and how it needs to be nurtured, and we're going to make the best crop we can with the seed. But I, as a farmer, don't determine the nature of that seed.
And I would have to say, unfortunately, most parents would be architects because
Yes, I'm afraid there's a lot of architects.
I would say there's probably much more architects than are farmers in that analogy because
Yeah.
most parents, I'd say almost all parents, are winging it.
Yeah.
They're going based on what they were raised. And
Right.
one of the things that I talk a lot about too for adults when it comes to parents is forgiveness.
That's
And
good.
it takes because I think as children we put our parents on pedestals like that they're this
Yeah.
all perfect being, and they're not. And
No.
they're doing the best of what they can. Now if they themselves had poor parenting, or maybe you know dysfunctional parenting, they're doing the best they can with what they have. Their
Mhm.
foundation, their blueprint was not so good. So it's hard to do that. It's hard to sometimes understand it from that perspective. But and sometimes we have high expectations because I see a lot of people in therapy or counseling. They'll say, I wish my mom or dad were more loving. My
Right.
friends' parents are more loving. I'm like,
Right.
but you can't expect them to have, you know, to be loving if they didn't never were shown love.
Yeah.
If they didn't do any work on themselves, which most,
Right.
especially any, older, I hate to use this, but the older generations really didn't
Sure.
get a lot of work done. It was just
No,
okay.
no, no.
Generational trauma just kept coming back in and over again because
Right. Yeah,
no
they
one
were,
really sought counseling.
that's right. They were too busy, they were too busy with their family and their work, and you go back to decades ago, the Great Depression and the World War II and the Korean War and all kinds of crises, and every generation has it, but you really have to pioneer if you're going to break through something for your generation to send to the next. If my mom or dad was never affectionate, I'm going to have to fight through to be able to do that with my children. So I tell people, you got to forgive your parents for where they didn't pioneer, and then you're
Hmm.
going to have to do that yourself. But Albert, one of the, I think, classic examples of the farmer versus architect or knowing your child is, I think, some of our research from decades ago showed us that about two-thirds of children are born strong-willed and about
Hmm.
one-third are born compliant. I mean, I can tell you, you need to discipline and raise that strong willed child in a different way than the compliant child. You can't just compare apples to apples. You may have
Hmm.
one child that's super sensitive, and like I said, maybe you mentioned like on the artistic side, the other one that is so good with numbers he could do them in his sleep. And they're going to need different education and different focus. I think one of our big tasks is, okay, what is their personality like? And I'm going to have to adjust for that. I'm not going to make them adjust. I'm going to
Hmm.
adjust to be the right parent for them. And then, of course, I mean, somebody said, wow, the secret of life is finding out what you're good at and doing it over and over and over. If your kid is great at kicking the soccer ball, help them kick the soccer ball. If they're great with their numbers, help them with that. But any other thoughts about the true identity and the things that kind of obscure that?
Well, the things that could obscure that, of course, the true identity is fear.
Fear.
Like especially because a lot of times going back to the parenting thing is words. Children sometimes are told to be not, don't be too dramatic. Oh, you need
Sure.
to be, you act this way, don't act this way.
Mhm.
Stop daydreaming, stop, talking this way. And so there's a lot of constraints that are placed on us from our parents. And again,
Mhm.
unintentionally.
Mhm.
But the truth of the matter is that we then learn the message, well, I can't really express myself because I'm going to be looked as being too extra or too sensitive or too out there. So
Yes.
that can block our identity. That can block the expression of our identity. So, and then therefore we just become on the sidelines. Also, another thing, again, if you come from sometimes controlling parents, you become, well, you can fall into the pattern of people pleasing,
Okay.
where
Sure.
you somehow inadvertently learned that you need to make other people happy all the time. Doesn't matter what you feel.
Sure.
And one way to start to recognize this, if you ever said yes to somebody, like if they asked you to do something and you said yes, and every part of you internally was saying no,
Mm.
or will you start to say, well, you yell, keep saying to yourself, why did I do this? Why did I do this? I don't want to do this. I really don't want to do this. I'll say yes, but I don't really
Yeah.
want to do it.
Right.
And you're not being authentic with yourself.
Right.
And I think a big word that we need to use is authenticity too, because it's like
Mhm.
really
Mhm.
being true to yourself and being honest with yourself is important. And
Yes, and Albert, it's like if I compromise my yes, my integrity, and I'm not authentic, it builds up over time. It might make it easier to compromise next time, but it might make me kind of angry with myself and the person that I've compromised to.
yes, absolutely. And therefore, like, there's something, as you know, called passive aggressive
Right?
personality patterns,
Mhm.
where you may suddenly, like, inadvertently do something aggressively, or say a wrong remark, or say something that is a little harsh. Because, especially if you're a people pleaser, what starts to go through your mind is resentment starts building up. It's like, look at all I did for
Mhm.
you. Look at all I do for people, and nobody appreciates me. And so that's why, like, when there's a whole debate in our field about the idea of being nice, and we hear
Right.
this term thrown a lot. I'm a nice guy. I'm a nice girl, and
Right.
a lot of times the truth of the matter is there's a difference between being nice and being needy and being because a lot of times these self-proclaimed nice people may be even acting passive aggressively on
Sure.
somebody. Being late to an appointment is a passive
Sure.
aggressive
Oh,
behavior.
yes.
Being late to a meeting, being late to a being unprepared, not
Right.
doing a good job, like your boss asks you to do something and you only do half of it or 75% of it.
Mhm.
That could be a sign of passive aggressive behavior.
That's a good point. I tell people, Albert, the whole people pleasing is really close to what I call the peacekeeper versus the peacemaker. And I
Mm-hmm.
tell people, okay, the peacekeeper really, really wants peace, but they're willing to compromise their integrity to get it. And so the peacemaker we see as a lot more positive says, I really want peace, but I won't compromise integrity. I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
hold on to my yes and my no. And that people pleaser is constantly they're saying no inside but saying yes outside, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a compromise, a compromise, a compromise, and it eats away at your true identity. And
Absolutely. Sure
yeah, and
does.
the way that you look at yourself. You know, I'll tell you an interesting story from the Seven Habits book. You may remember this. I loved this story. They're sitting in bed one night. His wife's making some phone calls because she's the chairman of a committee. And she calls up, one of her friends. Hey, I'm on this committee. I need some people on it. I'm the chair. And her friend is so gracious. She's like, "Oh, thank you for thinking of me. I'm sure you guys are going to get some great things done, but my plate is full, and so I have to politely say no." And she hangs up and looks at her phone, her husband, and goes, I wish I'd said that when they asked me to be chair of this committee.
Yeah, well, and that's the whole thing too. You have to, I think, empower people to. You can say no and be very gracious, as that
Yes.
person was, as a friend was, and say, "Look, I thank you for thinking of me, but this
Yes.
isn't going to work." And one of the things that I think, when we have to learn to say no effectively, is to not apologize, because I see this a lot. I'm sorry. No, don't get
Sorry.
mad at me. Please don't. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. No, just say,
Mm-hmm.
this isn't going to work. I'm too busy right now, or this is not aligning to what I want to do. What my mission is, or my brand, or whatever that it is. But I appreciate you thinking of me. And even if you want to be a step further, I can help maybe point you in the direction of somebody who might. Is you call these people up and say, you still offered something, but you don't compromise your integrity. And the same
Yeah,
thing
you
goes, like,
don't
if
apologize. Yeah.
you don't apologize and you don't give in, because when you start apologizing, it kind of opens the door to be like, okay, well, maybe I can talk you into it now.
Yeah, exactly.
I know, now you just, like, showed your weakness. You've shown your
Right.
cards. Okay,
And you know what I
now let's
what I
talk,
tell
talk through it.
yeah, what I
Mhm.
tell people, Albert, is that one of the secrets of life is recognizing what's necessary pain and what's unnecessary. If I have a no I need to say, I say it in a gracious way, but I don't apologize, because if that's painful for you, that's necessary pain for me to maintain my integrity. Now, it wouldn't be necessary for me to say, blank, blank, no, I would never do anything with you in my, that's
Yeah, of course not.
unnecessary
Yeah, yeah,
pain,
right.
of
Of course,
course,
that would be
right?
highly inappropriate.
But
Yes.
I totally agree with you. I don't want to apologize because, in a sense, I'm saying, I'm sorry that I have a no here. And internally, I'm not sorry. I'm glad that I have a no. I
Hmm.
get to have a no. And then, of course, sometimes I have a yes. And I can enjoy that too.
Yeah. No, and that's, that this is something I had to work on internally too.
Oh,
My
yes.
life, because even as a college professor, there are times when I have to tell students, students are asking me at the end of the semester, is there anything you could do? I don't want to fail the class, or I need to get
Right.
an A. I'm like, I don't
Right.
say I'm sorry. I'm not. No, I'm sorry.
Right.
You haven't
Right.
earned it.
Right. Right.
This is the grade it's going to be. Now
Mhm.
I can help you next time, where we can work together if you would take the class
Sure.
again on, proper practices. But no, this is not gonna work. And I think that's great to have, is that internal thing. Even if you're, like, if your boss asks you to work overtime, no, not gonna do it.
Right.
Weekends are
Yeah.
my family
I've got to
time.
go to church, or I've got to be
I've
with
got to
my
go to church.
family, or
I got to be with
whatever.
my family.
Yeah.
However, if you need help, we can work on this next week when I come back into
Mhm.
the office. We can
Mhm.
prioritize this task. So you're still offering an alternative, but at the same time, you're speaking up for yourself. And I know some people, especially, I can speak from experience on this. People are worried, like, oh, well, are they going to disapprove? Are they going to be upset with me? Most of the
Mhm.
time, if they're, I would say, decent people, they're not going to be upset. They're
No.
not going to be. They might even respect you even more. And if they are going to get really upset and disappointed, or even you get backlash, then these may not be the people you want to be associating or working with.
Yes. Even that can be a positive, because it's like, oh, I'm maybe seeing a little bit of your true colors here. That helps inform me for the future, right? Because it's like, I know that I have to be responsible for what I agree to, what I disagree with, and they have to be responsible too. And, you take a college class, and honestly, part of it is simply, will you do what it takes to get the A or the B, or will you not? And I can do my part as a professor, but you're going to have to do your part, and I just can't do your part.
Of course, and it
And
wouldn't be fair. It would, and I use the example too. It wouldn't be fair to the other students who did do their work.
that's good.
And if I were to be lenient, then why put any effort into it? And
Exactly. Exactly.
um,
If all you gotta do is go up to the professor and beg for the higher grade. Well, Dr. Bramante, this has been so good. Is there any of these areas or anything that we haven't covered that you'd like to kind of bring together? Because we've talked about these defense mechanisms, we've talked about identity,
mhm.
and we've talked about some of the specific ways that we started off talking about resiliency, which I think is an incredibly important topic. But if we got to kind of wrap some things up, or if you have some final words, I'd love to hear that from you.
So yeah, a couple of things that I think are important just to go by based on patterns is that the ability to set boundaries. I think is so important
Okay.
as adults, because it's easy to sometimes you know be boundaryless, and so being setting boundaries is really empowering, and even to
Yes.
yourself too, even self boundaries. So because very often if you're the whole thing of identity, if there's a lot of people that are going through life with no boundaries,
Hmm.
and maybe because they had no boundaries as a child,
Right.
shown to them. And then also going back to, I think it's kind of good. We should end like resilience being full circle, because that's how I always end my
Sure.
classes. Um, the one thing that kind of like I feel is lacking in the mental health community is the talks about resilience and growth. So we talk a lot about post traumatic stress disorder, but
Right.
what we really don't talk a lot about is post traumatic growth.
Oh, I like that.
So what is your post traumatic growth today?
Hmm. Hmm.
How are you growing from this, trauma or this experience? And this is why, like, I don't like to use the word victims. Like, even if you're a domestic, I use
Yes.
like the word survivor. So you're a domestic
Sure.
violence survivor. You're a rape survivor rather than you're a
Sure.
rape victim.
Sure.
And also, I listen. Finally, with the world of addiction, a lot of times I feel like the 12-step group is great, but it's always like I'm a recovering addict.
Right.
What about change it to I'm sober?
I'm sober.
Yeah,
I like that.
not that you're a recovering addict, because you're then signifying, if you say you're sober, it comes across that resilience mindset. Like, so.
I like that. And that goes with your growth thing too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I'm sober, and by the grace of God, I'll be sober today too. And that's growth. One more day
Yes.
of being sober.
Exactly. Rather than one more day in being recovery, or one more day of being a recovering because then it's like you're going back into those patterns again.
Um, I love that phrase, post traumatic growth. You're the first one that's ever said that to me, so I really like that. And maybe we can close on this quick story. Many years ago, probably 20 plus years ago, because I've been counseling since the early 90s. I got to meet a man that had been in a really severe accident, and it was so bad it was going to alter his life, and he was in the hospital for a long time. And of course, he and his wife were fighting depression and discouragement. For months and months, they were just focused on what they couldn't do. And then one day, one of them came up with the idea, hey, how about today we focus on anything positive that happens, any growth? And he said, Mark, that turned our lives around. It was like, today I picked up a fork. Today I held a glass or I took a
I
drink.
love it.
And we just started focusing on what we could do and how we were growing, and the depression just fell away.
I love it. That's great. Focus on
So
growth.
thank you so much, Dr. Albert Bramante, college professor, talent agent. And how can we reach you? We'll, of course, put this on the podcast, but what's the best way to follow you or to connect with you, Dr. Bramante?
I would say definitely the best way to do it is my LinkedIn. Um,
Okay.
you can reach me on LinkedIn under Albert Bramante. Feel free to send me a message. I'd be happy
Okay.
to have a conversation. So yeah, and then go to my website, albertbramante.com.
There you go. albertbramante.com. Thank you so much for being on. Hey, I hope you enjoy New Jersey this week.
Thank you. Thank you again for having me.
God bless you.
You too.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please do us a favor and like, subscribe, and share with others who might need it. And you can find additional resources at SamaritansWell.com.